Chapter 10 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Catherine Louise. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 10 The Human Aura. Surrounding every living body, and some non-living materials, there is a halo or aura which may be seen under certain exceptional conditions. Clairvoyants have always contended that they could see this aura surrounding human beings, but they were laughed at for their pains by the majority of scientists who continued to disbelieve in its existence. About the middle of the 19th century, Baron von Richtenbach published a book on the aura, paying particular attention to the emanations which his sensitives had seen coming from crystals and the poles of horseshoe magnets. It is now known that both magnets and crystals give off a very noticeable aura, and this may be seen by anyone possessing even moderate psychic development, if they observe these objects when placed in a darkened room. How studied by the aid of chemical screens. Needless to say, all this was disbelieved at the time, and it was not until 1911 that the existence of the aura was proved scientifically by means of mechanical and chemical means. Dr. Kilner, the electrician of St. Thomas Hospital, London, then showed that it is possible for anyone to see the aura issuing from a living human being by means of especially prepared glass slides containing a chemical named dicyanin. The subject of the experiment is placed against a white or black cloth background in a nearly darkened room, and must be at least partially nude, as the aura cannot be seen through the clothing. The investigator then looks through one of the chemical screens at the daylight. Then, closing his eyes, pulls down the blind so as to make the room nearly dark. In this light, the figure of the model can be seen only faintly, and if the subject is looked at through the glass screen, the aura may be seen by nearly anyone possessing good eyesight. In this case, the investigator does not have to be a clairvoyant, since the eyes are rendered susceptible to certain artificial light waves by means of the chemical screens. Usually our eyes cannot perceive these waves. In this way, the skeptical world has been convinced of the reality of the human aura, and it is now considered a proved scientific fact. The three auras thus disclosed. The human aura or atmosphere consists of a number of layers or strata, one beyond the other, extending out into space. By means of Dr. Kilner's chemical screens, three of these divisions may be clearly perceived. First, what is called the Etheric Double. This is seen like a dark line, slightly grayish in color, which extends over the whole surface of the body, conforming exactly to its shape. Doubtless, this is one manifestation of the double or etheric body. Beyond this extends the inner aura, which is usually 2 or 3 inches broad. It conforms to the contour of the body throughout, and is more or less colored by the health of the individual and by the mental or emotional states which may be present at that time. Beyond this again is the outer aura, beginning where the inner aura ceases and extending from 3 to 6 inches as a rule before it becomes invisible. It extends slightly further in the case of women than it does in men. This aura is very variable and is greatly influenced by all the mental and psychic conditions of the person to whom it belongs. Its colors vary also very greatly, but this cannot as a rule be seen through the screens because they themselves are either dark red or blue. It takes a trained clairvoyant to see all the subtle gradations and variations of color in the aura. How to train your psychic sight. The best way to train yourself to see auras of this character is perhaps the following. 1. In a darkened room, study the aspect of a good horseshoe magnet, either suspended in the air by a silk thread or placed on a support with poles up, and vary the position of the observation until a faint luminosity is observed at the poles and along the edges of the magnet. 2. In the light, repeat the same process, trying to make out these lines and the extensions and limitations of the aura. It must be understood that this vision can be obtained artificially only through the action of the will, and by a proper focusing of the eyes, the perception of auras requiring a very different focus from ordinary sight, and this focusing is very often, nearly always in fact, different in each of the 2 eyes. The attempted focusing of the sight must therefore be made with each eye separately, and then with both combined. It may happen that one eye only can be focused for this special vision, or when both are found available, if both focuses are not identical, the active use of both eyes at one time may destroy the psychic sight of the sensitive eye. The aura in daylight and darkness. It is important to master the faculty of seeing the magnetic aura in the daylight, because more complete details can thus be eventually obtained than in the dark, and this is the only way to learn how to perceive the human aura. For the purpose of trying one's vision in broad daylight, take a good horseshoe magnet and hold it perpendicularly in front of you, either against the background of an open outside light, such as can be obtained from looking out from the inside of a room through an open window, or against a near inside background, for instance a white or dark wall, according to the nature of the light. Then look at the edge of the magnet with one eye only, and gradually approach it or slide it away from you, until you obtain the best focus of vision. Look steadily along the same point, until it dawns on you that a kind of a quivering narrow band of mist or vapor is flowing from the metal and prevents your sight from freely perceiving the object back of it, producing in fact a sort of bending of your visual rays. As soon as you realize the presence on the edge of the magnet of this current of vaporous mist, which may be compared to the appearance of the heated air which arises in summertime from hot fields, the first psychic visual victory has been obtained, and the perception of the other phenomena connected with the aura will only need time, perseverance, and practice. And once the magnet is conquered, one may expect to speedily obtain the sight of the beautiful and intricate currents on the human body. The structure of the aura. After the aura has been perceived and its general layers distinguished, the student must turn his attention to its structure and color variations. The question of color will be treated in the next chapter, which is devoted entirely to that subject. As to the structure or composition of the aura, if this be studied carefully, it will be found that it is composed in a great variety of different ways, according to the object or person emitting it. Thus, the aura of flowers is very different to that of magnets or human beings. The aura of flowers. It is a very interesting study to try and perceive psychically the composition of the aura of various flowers. For instance, that of the violet is about 1/8 of an inch in thickness, and composed first of a bright light, then a line of dark blue, shading away into a very light blue, all these following the contour of the edge of the leaf. Above these lines is a scalloped or semi-linear string or border of 2 rows of little purplish-red figures, diamond-shaped, very regularly distributed, so as to form 2 sets of 14 little diamonds over the space of each small lobe of the leaf. Then, above these, a wave of dark blue mist in crescent form, shading off into light blue. This is only a sample reading of one flower. Each flower has its own particular aura, some of them being very complex, but it will serve to show the student how interesting a study this can be made. The study of the aura of plants alone, carefully undertaken, would occupy considerable time. The human aura and how to study it. After you have studied the auras of magnets and plants in this way, you should turn your attention to the auras of living human beings. Children may easily be studied, and their auras are exceedingly interesting. Developed clairvoyants are enabled to see several different auras, each of them being composed of a number of subdivisions, and each subdivision having a different structure and color. It is a good plan to begin the study of the aura by the aid of the chemical screens, before mentioned, in semi-darkness, and then to practice viewing the aura without the screens, and, as the eyes gain sensitiveness, to admit more and more light, until it can be clearly seen in the daylight. In this way your psychic sight will be gradually and naturally developed. End of Chapter 10. Recording by Catherine Louise.
Chapter 11 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Libby Gone. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 11. Color and its Interpretation. In the last chapter we learned that there is a psychic atmosphere or aura surrounding each animate object, and particularly human beings, and that both the structure and the color of this varies greatly. We must now inquire first into the nature of these colorings, and secondly, try to solve the question, what do they mean? How are we to interpret these colors, realizing that they are but symbols of something which they merely express? The color of every individual is doubtless somewhat different, and with the same individual it differs at various times, according to his state of health, the mental and psychical changes, etc. The majority of highly developed clairvoyants agree, however, with C.W. Leadbeater that the following colors may be distinguished, and that they signify the existing physical, mental, and spiritual conditions as follows. The meaning of various colors. Black indicates hatred and malice. Anger and hate thought forms are like heavy smoke. Red. Deep red flashes on black ground show anger. Lurid red indicates sensuality. Brown. Dull brown red shows avarice. Dull hard brown gray selfishness. Greenish brown. With red or scarlet flashes denotes jealousy. Gray. Heavy leaden shows deep depression. Livid gray shows fear. Crimson indicates love. Orange, pride or ambition. Yellow shows intellectuality. Duller tints show it is used for selfish purposes. Green. Deep blue-green shows good qualities, deep sympathy, while gray-green shows deceit and cunning. Blue. Dark indicates religious feeling. Light blue shows devotion to a noble spiritual ideal. White or near white shows high spirituality. Dull brown and blue show selfish religious feeling. Dull yellow, low type intellect. Apricot shows pride. Brick red indicates selfish affection and avarice. Light and bright red show pure affection. Grayish green with reddish tinge shows deceit. The health aura is clearly visible to the clairvoyant as a mass of faintly luminous violet-grey mist, interpenetrating the denser part of the human body and extending very slightly beyond. It is easy to understand how almost infinite may be the combinations and modifications of all these hues, so that the most delicate graduation of character, or the most evanescent of mingled feelings may be expressed with the greatest accuracy. Many of the colours are unknown to our physical faculties, so that it is impossible to picture them with psychic hues. When a clairvoyant sees these colours in the aura or surroundings of an individual, therefore, he may feel that the characteristica indicated are present, and the same thing is true when they are to be seen in the surroundings of a returning spirit. The 7 auras surrounding man. When the advanced student carefully studies the human aura, he will find that there are a number of straight, white, very fine lines emanating from the body, and particularly the head, which resemble rays of white light. These are magnetic rays, which do not deal directly with the psychical condition of the subject. The innermost aura will be found to consist of 5 different coloured bands. The first will be pure white, the second light blue, the third darker blue, the fourth lemon yellow, the fifth dark red. The second layer of the aura will be found to be bluish violet merging into rose. Those two interpenetrate one another, forming very beautiful combinations. The third layer consists of 3 cloudy zones, the first pink, the second violet, and the third orange. The fourth layer consists of green cloud-like waves, tinged with yellow, resembling the golden edges of clouds, behind which the sun is shining. The fifth will be seen to be slate or indigo in colour with silver edges. The sixth will consist of a beautiful light blue, with a whitish golden fringe. The 7th or outermost aura will be seen to be a greyish mist of a light violet tint. The outer aura completes the auric emanation of man, and is the outer shell, as it were, consisting of the so-called auric egg surrounding every human being, of which more will be said later. Changes in the colours. When a golden yellow light is seen about the head, it may be assumed that such an individual has great intellectuality combined with spirituality, and in some cases it has been said that this contains a cloud of gold dusk, each speck revolving spirally on itself. These colours of various auras are not unchanging, as before said, so that the student must not expect to see them exactly as described. They are greatly modified by the mental and psychical condition of the subject, and the thoughts and emotions which the latter may be experiencing at the time of observation will also affect the aura. The colours of thoughts. Thus fear gives rise to circles of bright rings, spread out in the form of a cone, of varying shades of grey, pink, and purple. A beautiful devotional thought may be expressed in the form of a star of bluish mist tinged with yellow. Pity may be seen as a reddish violet cloud, from which issue pointed cones of a brighter pink. Deception will give rise to a steel blue mist, tinged with pink and taking the shape of any regular spiral. Fear may give rise to balls of grey, pink, and yellow mist, while fear combined with anger will give forth a blackish grey mist, from which red electrical flashes appear to issue. The auric egg. These colours extend over the whole of the auric egg, and may be seen by the clairvoyant to be influencing it throughout. The auric egg, which is formed round an individual by the atmosphere or aura emanating from him, extends both above and below his body, as well as sideways, and is from 9 to 10 feet in height, and 5 feet in diameter. If the colour of this auric egg be examined by a clairvoyant, characteristics of the individual may be clearly defined after the necessary practice and development, and the general character of the subject may be in this way discovered and interpreted. The colours of various individuals. Of course, it is necessary to make a long study of the aura and to attain a good deal of psychic development before all the details contained in this chapter can be discovered by the student in actual practice. Assuming, however, that you have progressed sufficiently in your studies to be enabled to see the aura of any individual, you may proceed to examine the whole auric egg with its varied colours. If you do this, you will find them to be about as follows. A highly developed individual will have a haze of golden light, issuing from the head and extending almost to the top of the egg. Above this will be a faint purplish light. On either side of this golden aura, and issuing upwards and outwards from the shoulders, will be a bluish light which merges into pink as it descends to the breast. From that point to the thighs a pinkish light may be seen, light in some cases, darkish red in others. About the knees this pink shades off into a delicate green, and this green covers the feet and extends downward almost to the lower margin of the auric egg, where it becomes a darkish blue. With less highly developed individuals these colours will vary according to the table given above. In some cases the auric egg will be composed almost entirely of greys, greens, and browns. Primary colours and their meanings. In general, it may be said that yellow and any bright clear colours, when seen in the aura of an individual, denote strong vitality and active intellectuality. Lilac, blue, and violet have to do with spiritual characteristics. They are associated with simple, unselfish natures, and with those having spiritual aspirations. Red is directly connected with passions, and particularly anger. Blue is associated with religious feeling, though if too muddy it denotes selfishness. The brighter and clearer the colours the better, and they should be as clear-cut as possible. Colours shown by spirits or seen clairvoyantly. These colours are not always associated with the human aura or with any human form. They are often seen by psychics who are developing themselves as cloud-like masses or shapes, which form more or less distinctly in front of them, and appear to take the outline of flowers, flashes, etc. Colours are occasionally seen in dreams, but the dream images of most people are colourless, or only light grey, like a shadow. They are in fact such stuff as dreams are made of. In general, these colours may be interpreted according to the laws given above, but the precise interpretation of these symbolic messages is a more difficult question to settle. A spirit who may be trying to communicate and to give a certain message to a medium may apply this same method of colour symbolism to convey his meaning, but this is often confusing to the psychic and difficult to interpret. We shall come to this question, however, in the next chapter, which is devoted to symbolism. End of chapter 11.
Of your psychic powers and how to develop them. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 12. Symbolism. Symbolism is one of the most important and, at the same time, one of the least understood subjects in the whole realm of psychics and spiritualism. A proper understanding of what it means, and the adequate interpretation of symbols as presented to the psychic, would prove of great value to every student, and to all those who are undertaking their own psychic development. What symbolism means. First of all, it is necessary that you should understand exactly what symbolism means. A symbol is a sign for something else, which it expresses in a more or less partial and incomplete manner. Usually, a symbol is a sign which appeals to one of the five senses, but denotes not a sensual thing, but the thought lying behind it. Thus, the printed word on the page is the symbol of the author's thought, expressed in that word. The poem is the expression of the poet's mind and spirit, as set forth in the words and meter of the poem, etc. Thus, symbols are always only partial and incomplete, and represent but a small fraction of the thing they stand for, and we should always be in error if we tried to reconstruct the whole of the thing symbolized from what we perceive by means of our senses. Before we proceed to the subject of symbolism as studied in psychics and the phenomena of spiritualism, one other point should be explained. We never see an object in the physical world as it really is. Symbolized objects. We only perceive or realize through our five senses various aspects or qualities of the object. Thus, if you are looking at an orange, your sense of sight gives you the impression of a reddish-yellow sphere, rather irregular on its surface. Your sense of touch tells you that this thing is round, that it is somewhat rough and cool. Your sense of smell supplies you with the information that it has a pleasant odor unlike anything else, which is confirmed by your taste. In this particular instance, the sense of hearing does not enter into the question, as it would in many other instances. Now, all these things which appeal to our senses, color, odor, texture, etc., are qualities of the orange and not the orange itself. The orange is always something different from all of these, above and beyond them, and is more inclusive than any of these qualities and symbols. Thus, suppose you took away one of those symbols, its color. The orange would immediately become invisible to you, yet it would continue to exist, though we could never know of its existence. This shows us clearly that symbols are very inadequate and imperfect representations of a vaster something lying behind them, and they represent only a small fraction of the totality of the thing as it really exists. Symbolism of Spirit. As applied to the spirit of man, we must begin by admitting the rather startling fact that no man has ever seen it. No man has ever seen another. All he has ever seen are the outward features, the form, the facial expressions of the other. And when our spirits hold communication with one another in this world, they do so by written symbols, by motions of the hands or head, or by means of air waves passing from the throat of one to the ear of the other. All but expressions or symbols, which are interpreted by us according to a certain prearranged code. If we did not have this prearranged code, it would be impossible for two intelligent beings to converse with one another, as may readily be seen when a Chinaman and an American meet for the first time, neither of them speaking the language of the other. They try as best they can to make each other understand what they are thinking about, what thoughts are in their minds, but they succeed very imperfectly, or not at all. The symbols employed are too inadequate to express their thoughts. Symbolism in spirit communication. Now, all these difficulties we encounter when a spirit endeavors to communicate with us through a medium or directly. It can express itself, as a rule, only very imperfectly, as will be explained in a later chapter, and must resort largely to symbols to convey its meaning. Hence we should be very mistaken if we were to interpret this symbolism literally, or to assume that it represented the whole of the subject matter which the spirit desired to convey. As I said in my book, The Problems of Psychical Research, our dreams, as we know, are largely symbolic, the work of Freud and others having proved this beyond all doubt. It is highly probable that the ravings of delirium are also of this nature, though no one, so far as I know, has yet devoted to their study the attention they deserve. Certainly it is true in mediumistic phenomena, for in trance conditions a large number of the messages, tests, and visions seen are of this nature and character, the symbolism being often so elaborate that the original thought is not perceived. Why this symbolism? The probable answer to this question is that the message cannot be given directly, and that this symbolic method of presentation must be resorted to in order to get the message through at all. There is good evidence to show that a pictorial method is resorted to very largely by the spirits, mediums seeing what they describe very often when the more direct auditory method is not resorted to. The spirit presents somehow to the mind of the medium a picture, which is described and often interpreted by the medium. Often this interpretation is quite erroneous, resembling a defective analysis of a dream. Because of this, the message is not recognized, yet the source of the message may have been perfectly veridical, truth-telling. Let me illustrate this more fully. Suppose you desire to tell a Chinaman who speaks not a word of English to fetch a certain object from the next room. It would be useless for you to say the word watch because he would not know what the word meant. Probably you would tap your waistcoat pocket, pretend to take out a watch, wind it, look at the hands, etc., in your endeavor to convey to him your meaning. If this were not recognized for any reason, you would have the utmost difficulty in conveying your meaning to him, and equal difficulty in telling him to fetch the watch from the next room. Now, supposing these antics, or somewhat similar ones, were resorted to by a spirit in his attempt to convey the word watch, perhaps to remind the sitter of a particular watch he used to wear. The spirit might well proceed as follows. He taps his stomach and looks at a spot over his left side. He seems to wish to convey the impression that he has suffered much from bowel trouble, perhaps a cancer on the left side. Yes, he seems to be taking something away from his body. Evidently they removed some growth and he wishes to convey the idea that something was taken from him. Now he is examining his hand. He is looking intently. Now he is doing something with his fingers. I can't see what it is, a little movement. Was he connected with machinery in life? Now he is pointing to the door, etc. The interpretation of symbols. Such an interpretation of the facts, it will be observed, while describing his actions, is wholly misleading as to its interpretation. The symbolism has been wholly misconstrued, and inasmuch as the subject probably never died of cancer, had no bowel trouble, underwent no operation, and was never connected with machinery, it is highly probable that the message would be put down wholly to the medium's subconscious imagination, or even to guessing or conscious fraud. Yet, it will be observed, the message was in its inception wholly veridical, the fault lying in the symbolism misinterpreted by the medium. There is evidence to show that other forms of symbolism are adopted also, applying to the auditory as well as to the visual presentation of images. It is well known that names are very difficult to obtain by mediums, and this is probably due to the fact that names are not pictures or visual symbols, and in themselves mean nothing as a rule. They are merely a combination of letters having a certain sound. The Forms of Symbolism. It is generally easier for the spirit to impress a partially developed psychic by means of a picture than in any other way, and for this reason names are difficult to get. Still, in many cases names are obtained by a picture shown. Thus, the name Merrifield was in one case given to the psychic as a picture of a number of children happily playing in a green field. Among other forms of symbolism are the following. A large key may be shown to the psychic. This may not mean a key at all, but a symbol of success, the key being the means by which the door of prosperity is opened. Colors are frequently shown, and nearly all colors are symbolic of something or other, and have their definite meaning, as we saw in the last chapter. Strange, weird, and horrible figures do not necessarily mean anything bad or anything evil. They may be symbolic of something entirely different, and this is frequently seen in dreams, which are composed almost entirely of symbols throughout. Most psychics, when they are developing, see peculiar specks, clouds, and forms shaping themselves before them in space. They are naturally at a loss to interpret and explain these images. While there is much latitude of interpretation, always in symbolism the following simple suggestions based on traditional teachings may be found helpful. Clouds and lights. Clouds, if white, may be interpreted as signifying happiness and prosperity, either to the psychic or to one near and dear to them. If these seem to recede rapidly and fade away in the distance, a journey is often indicated. If the clouds appear to be advancing toward you, it indicates that news will shortly reach you. Good if the clouds are white, bad if they are dark. If red and lurid, ill fortune is upon your horizon, for which you must be on constant guard. Black clouds symbolize troubles of the heart. Tiny moving speeds of light, if they truly result from psychic development, are said to introduce that you are progressing favorably in your psychic sensitiveness. If these specks are dark, however, evil or harmful influences may be about you, for which you must be on a constant lookout. A light within a light is said to symbolize the presence of some spirit, desirous of communicating. Should such a sign appear to you, try at once to enter into communication with the spirit intelligence by asking questions, and note whether the light you see endeavors to reply to you by means of some simple code. Reptiles and other unpleasant signs usually symbolize the hidden fears of the psychic. They are symbolized in this way, externalizing the subconscious fear thought of the subject. Root out your hidden fear and apprehension, assert your mastery and fearlessness, and the unpleasant sign will always disappear. The subconscious and symbols. The subconscious mind has the faculty of describing in symbolic form thoughts, impressions, or influences which come to it, either through the senses or more directly by telepathic or clairvoyant visions or messages which are said to be given through it by the spirits. The spirit may convey a certain message to the subconscious mind of the psychic, and the message may be externalized or presented to the ordinary conscious mind in symbolic form, representing, apparently, something entirely different from the original message. It is in the interpretation of these symbols that much of the true art of mediumship and psychic development will be found to lie. The better the medium, the more expert in the interpretation of these symbols. At present, no general rule can be laid down as to the interpretation of the symbols employed, since these will differ very largely in every case, each medium having his own method of interpretation and his own form of symbolism. You must learn for yourself, by repeated experience, what the various symbols mean to you, and thus form a code or method of interpretation, which you can always follow throughout your future development. A close study of symbolism will yield you very important practical results, as well as being of great interest in itself. End of Chapter 12.
Of your psychic powers and how to develop them. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michael Packard of Western Colorado. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 13. Telepathy. Telepathy, mind reading, thought transference, are all terms meaning very much the same thing, namely, the ability to impress the mind of another person with a definite thought or thoughts, without traveling through the usual avenues of sense. The word telepathy was coined by Mr. F. W. H. Myers in 1882, and is derived from two Greek words, tele, at a distance, and pathos, feeling, and means literally sensing at a distance. From this it has come to mean thought reading, in general, as we now understand it. How telepathy operates. How telepathy takes place we cannot yet say with certainty. Some scientific men, such as Sir William Crookes, are inclined to believe that vibrations in the ether travel from brain to brain, very much like the messages in wireless telegraphy. Others, on the contrary, contend that this explanation is insufficient, and that we have no proof that such brain waves exist. As Mr. Myers expressed it, life has the power of manifesting itself to life, and this is as far as we can go as yet by way of scientific explanation of the facts. It is almost certainly true that telepathy takes place not between the conscious minds of two individuals, but by way of the subconscious, that vast field which we described in Chapter 4, the subconscious. So that if a message is sent from one conscious mind to another, it would travel in rather a roundabout fashion as follows: from the conscious to the subconscious mind of A, from that to the subconscious mind of B, and from the subconscious mind to the conscious mind of B. In B, the process by which it was conveyed from the subconscious to the ordinary mind would be that of externalization, so frequently seen in dreams, crystal gazing, and other phenomena. This fully explains to us why it is that we frequently receive telepathic messages at the moment we are falling to sleep, or at least appear to do so. We may have received the message an hour or two before this, but its externalization was impossible until the ordinary consciousness ceased to be so active with the affairs of the day, and then the subconscious mind had a chance to deliver its message, received some time before from some distant mind. The various kinds of telepathic messages. Telepathic messages may be visual, in which case they take the form of pictures, figures, written or printed words, etc. They may be auditory, in which case they take the form of spoken words. They may be emotional, in which case the subject may feel a particular depression or excitement. They may be volitional, in which case the subject is seized with the imperative desire to perform a certain action, etc. Telepathic messages may originate either in the living or in the dead. As they are transmitted from the subconscious mind, perhaps under the supervision and direction of the conscious mind, they are often transmitted most effectually during sleep, trance, under the influence of some drug, in delirium, at the moment of death, etc. These messages are most easily received at such times when the conscious mind is asleep or in abeyance, and for this reason we have so-called visions of the dying, ecstasy, trance-speaking, and revelation, etc. Telepathy from spirits. It is probably true that spirits converse with one another directly by means of telepathy, though they understand fully the thought of the other as though the sentence had been fully spoken. Swedenborg tells us that this is the case, and that the telepathic thoughts sent out by a spirit appear to other spirits or to mediums in trance as clear and sonorous as spoken words. If spirits in the flesh can converse at times with one another by means of telepathy, and if disembodied spirits converse with one another by this means, it is only natural to suppose that this is frequently the method of communication resorted to between embodied and disembodied spirits. And all trance mediums know that this is in fact the case. The larger meanings and applications of telepathy will be discussed more fully in the chapter devoted to prayer, etc. Practical experiments in telepathy. The following practical exercises will enable you to prove to your own satisfaction that telepathy exists, and that it can be reduced to a more or less simple process by continued practice. Select a friend with whom you are in sympathy, physically, mentally, and morally. One of you must be the sender or transmitter, the other the receiver or recipient. Let us suppose for a moment that you are the transmitter. The recipient should be seated in a comfortable chair at one end of a fairly large room, which must be freely ventilated. It is best that, at least during the early experiments, he should be blindfolded, or that he close his eyes or sit with his back to you, pencil in hand and pad on knee. He should sit in a semi-darkened part of the room. For your part, you should sit at a table, facing him, that is his back, with a pad of paper and pencil before you. Have a bright light thrown on the pad of paper, leaving the rest of the room in semi-darkness. Now draw upon the paper a symbol, perhaps a geometric figure, such as a triangle, circle, square, etc. Look at this figure intently, and endeavor to impress it on the recipient. You should not make each trial exceed 1 minute in length. How to ensure success? The attitude of mind which you hold during these experiments is very important. You should will that your recipient should see the picture presented to him, yet you should not strain yourself in the attempt, and wrinkling your brows, tensing the muscles, etc. will not add to the certainty with which your picture is conveyed, rather the reverse. On the other hand, you should have complete confidence in the fact that he will get the impression you are sending him. Never allow yourself for a moment to believe that you will fail. Say to yourself that he has already succeeded in receiving it. Do not allow yourself to become flustered or worried or anxious. Imagine your thoughts traveling to him in a definite form, either in the shape of the object itself or in the word, square, circle, etc. Though in that case you must be careful that you do not unconsciously whisper the word so that it hears it. The recipient on his part should make his mind as blank as possible and note down any pictures or impressions that come to him, no matter how wild they may appear. Above all, you must not be discouraged by early non-successes, for these you must expect. More complicated experiments. After you have succeeded with the diagrams, you may try more complicated pictures, such as playing cards, which are very good for this purpose, as the deck may be shuffled between each draw, and it is easy to calculate the percentage of guesses, since chance would always be 51 to 1 against the subject hitting upon the correct card by accident. After these experiments, you may try some in the transference of pain. Prick yourself lightly in various parts of the body with a sharp needle, or pinch yourself and see whether the subject can locate the pain correctly on himself. If he is a good subject, he will do so in very many instances, as though the pain were transferred directly to him and you were pricking or pinching him. Next, you may try a number of experiments in smell and taste. Procure a number of substances, such as cloves, nutmeg, pepper, sugar, etc., and smell or taste these in turn, being careful that you are far enough removed from your subject to prevent him from smelling these in the usual way. Many good subjects can tell immediately the substance you are putting into your mouth the instant you placed it there. After you have succeeded this far, you should try to increase the distance between you until you can perform the same feats though miles apart. How to prevent evil influences from affecting you. These simple experiments will prove to you and to the skeptic the existence of telepathy. They will render you more sensitive to the reception of messages from distant living minds, and also messages from the discarnate. In this way you will cultivate your sensitiveness to messages of this character, and this will be beneficial to you, provided that you do not carry these practices too far and cultivate your sensitiveness unduly in wrong directions. Under normal, healthy conditions, your mind will not be affected by impressions of this character, since it will be most difficult for you to receive them, as a rule, no matter how hard you may try. The mind always protects itself against too easy access by outside minds. It is very rare indeed that subjects are impressed against their will. Some persons, it is true, believe that others at a distance are influencing them in this manner, and impressing them to do certain things. Many believe that they are hypnotized, etc. But in nearly all cases, these beliefs are illusory. They have no foundation in fact. When examined, they are found to rest wholly in the imagination of the subject, and they are frequently but the indications of an unbalanced mind. This does not mean that such persons are necessarily insane, but they would become so were they to dwell upon their imagined grievance long enough, and believe in it after they have been shown repeatedly that such was not the true case. It is this persistent will to believe in a thing which is not true that is one of the causes of insanity. The student who practices telepathy within reason and who has followed the instructions contained in the early chapters of this book as regards fortifying and protecting his own inner nature, need have no fear that telepathic influences or impressions from others will ever affect him against his own will. In nearly all cases, these so-called influences are imaginary. And even should they exist, the subject, who has mustered himself and who has strengthened his soul from within, is capable of overcoming and repulsing any outside forces of this character, and of preventing any telepathic influence ever reaching him, no matter whether it comes from the living or from the dead. End of Chapter 13. Recording by Michael Packard of Western Colorado.
Of your psychic powers and how to develop them. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jeannie Hall. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 14. Clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is derived from two French words and means literally clear seeing. It means far more, however, in the language of spiritualism and psychics, and is now used to cover and classify, if not to explain, a large number of different phenomena, which someday will probably be explained in other ways. There are various types and kinds of clairvoyance, different authorities having given somewhat different definitions of the various subdivisions. Thus, the Manual of the National Spiritualists Association subdivides and defines the various types of clairvoyance as follows. Subjective clairvoyance. 1. Subjective clairvoyance is that psychic condition of a human being, who thereby becomes a medium, which enables spirit intelligences, through the manipulation of the nerve centers of sight, to impress or photograph upon the brain of the medium pictures and images which are seen as visions by the medium without the aid of the physical eye. These pictures and images may be of things, spiritual or material, past or present, remote or near, hidden or uncovered, or they may have their existence simply in the conception or imagination of the medium communicating them. Objective clairvoyance. 2. Objective clairvoyance is that psychic power or function of seeing objectively spiritual beings, objects, and things by and through the spiritual sensorium which pervades the physical mechanism of vision, without which objective clairvoyance would be impossible. But few persons are born with this power. In some it is developed, and in others it has but a casual quickening. Its extent is governed by the rate of vibration under which it operates. Thus, one clairvoyant may see objectively spiritual things which to another may be invisible, because of the degree of difference in the intensity of the power. X-ray clairvoyance. 3. X-ray clairvoyance is a form of clairvoyance which partakes of the characteristics of the X-ray and seems to be objective. The clairvoyant who possesses this power is able to see physical objects through intervening physical matter, can perceive the internal parts of the human body, diagnose disease, and observe the operations of healing and decay. Cataleptic clairvoyance. 4. Cataleptic clairvoyance occurs when the body is in a trance state resembling sleep, induced by hypnotic power, exercised by an incarnate or decarnate spirit, or it may be self-induced. When in this state the spirit leaves the body and is able, at its own will or the suggestion of the hypnotist, to travel to remote places and to see clearly what is transpiring in the places it visits, and to observe spiritual as well as material things in its environment. While in this state, it sometimes happens that the thoughts of the spirit in its travels are expressed by the lips of the physical body, and that thought images are conveyed to it through the physical body. This is due to the fact that there is a spirit cord which connects the body and the spirit and transmits vibrations between them. As long as this cord is not severed, the spirit can return to the body, but should it be severed, then what we call death would at once ensue. Under this form of clairvoyance, there is an interblending of subjective and objective spiritual sight. Trance control clairvoyance. 5. Trance-control clairvoyance is that psychic state under which the control of the physical body of the medium is assumed by a spirit intelligence, and the consciousness of the medium is, for the time being, dethroned. In this case, the controlling spirit is really the clairvoyant, and simply uses the medium's body as a means of communicating what the spirit sees, and therefore the question of subjective and objective spiritual sight, insofar as the medium is concerned, cannot be raised. To some persons who go to mediums for readings and who may become witnesses in trials at law, it may not be known that under trance control, the medium is to all intents and purposes absent. Therefore, in dealing with definitions of clairvoyance to be used for the enlightenment of thinking people, judges, and juries, it seems necessary for the protection of such mediums to explain what is here termed trance-control clairvoyance. Telepathic clairvoyance, etc. 6. Telepathic clairvoyance is the subjective perception in picture form of thought transmitted from a distance. The type of clairvoyance illustrated in Class 4 is frequently called traveling clairvoyance, because the spirit appears to travel, after leaving its body, and visit distant scenes. According to the above definitions, this type of clairvoyance is classified under definition number 1, but other authorities would give it a separate class by itself. When the psychic's mind seems to travel backward along the stream of time, and remembers events which were beyond its normal recollection, we have cases of so-called retrocognition. When, on the other hand, the psychic's mind seems to travel forward into the future and sees scenes and events which, of course, he was otherwise unable to foretell, we have cases of prevision, prophecy, and precognition. This latter subject will be dealt with more fully in the chapter devoted to prophecy versus fortune-telling. We also have spontaneous and experimental clairvoyance, these definitions explaining themselves. Then direct and indirect clairvoyance. Direct when no other mind or agency is involved but the psychic's own. Indirect when it goes through a roundabout channel and involves some other mind, incarnate or discarnate. As opposed to telepathic clairvoyance, we have so-called independent clairvoyance. Also, there are cases of reciprocal clairvoyance, in which two persons see one another at the same time and, as it were, exchange their clairvoyant visions. The type of clairvoyance which is characterized by leaving the body and visiting the spiritual spheres, afterwards returning to reanimate the body, is called ecstasy. Mr. Ledbetter divides clairvoyance into 3 subdivisions: clairvoyance in time, clairvoyance in space, and direct clairvoyance, in which the astral or spiritual senses are opened up so as to perceive planes of activity now about us. Dream clairvoyance. Clairvoyance may also occur in dreams, crystal visions, etc., and clairaudience, which corresponds to clairvoyance, save that the information is obtained by means of the ear rather than the eye, may be obtained through shell hearing. In this case, the messages are heard rather than seen. Another technical name for clairvoyance, which is sometimes used, is telesthesia. Clairvoyance may manifest itself in a variety of forms, as the above definitions would signify. The most common form is spontaneous clairvoyance, in which the psychic sees pictures of absent persons and scenes. Clairvoyant dreams are fairly common. Clairvoyant diagnosis. There is a type of mental clairvoyance which enables the subject to see, as it were, into the body of another, diagnosing his disease as though he perceived clearly the conditions present in that individual's body at the time. This form of psychic vision was possessed by Andrew Jackson Davis in a remarkable degree, but is possessed by many psychics of our own day. Another form of clairvoyance is that in which underground metals and waters may sometimes be perceived. Usually in this case, the psychic walks over the ground to be explored with a forked twig or stick in his hands. Suddenly this bends or dips, and where this happens, water or metal is to be found. This is technically known as dowsing, and has been proved to exist as a scientific fact by Sir William F. Barrett, Professor of Physics in the University of Dublin. Of late years, a new and peculiar type of clairvoyance has been developed by Mr. Vincent N. Turvey of London, a friend of Mr. W. T. Stead. He termed this phone-voyance, for the reason that he receives his impressions and intuitions, etc., when he is conversing with a distant friend over the telephone, and then only. This is a form of sensitiveness which could be obtained by many psychics if they developed it. The explanation of clairvoyance. Clairvoyance has been explained in a variety of ways. We may briefly summarize these theories as follows. 1. The astral or spiritual sense theory. This may be stated as follows. Corresponding to each physical sense organ, the eye, ear, etc., there is a corresponding spiritual or astral sense organ. We see physical objects by means of the physical eye and hear them by means of the physical ear. When we see clairvoyantly, on the contrary, we see by means of our spiritual eye, and when we hear clairaudiently, we hear by means of the spiritual or astral ear. These spiritual sense organs function in a spiritual world, and of course serve the spiritual body when we die as our physical organs now serve us, and operate on the spirit plane of activity. If their use is not cultivated in precisely the right direction, it may lead to difficulties for the reason that both the astral and spiritual sight may be used at the same time. They may become mixed up and you may see two worlds at once instead of one, so that you cannot be sure when you go outside the door whether you are going to step on the pavement or into a great ditch, both of which you see equally clearly before you. Many persons have got into this condition, which takes some time to outgrow. 2. The spiritual influence theory. According to this theory, clairvoyance is accomplished not by means of the subject's own unaided powers, but always through the instrumentality of a spirit who sees the distant scenes, etc., and impresses them upon the subject's mind telepathically. Tubes, thought forms, and direct perception. 3. The astral tube theory. According to this view, the clairvoyant constructs a sort of telescope or tube for himself out of astral matter, and through this he looks. The figures, in this case, always appear small and far off. 4. By the creation of a thought form. On this theory, we create a thought form for ourselves in the locality we desire to visit, and utilize it for the purpose of observation. We look out of its eyes, hear with its ears, etc. 5. The direct perception theory. This theory says that outside influences play no part in the phenomena, but that we perceive distant scenes ourselves by means of some process of self-projection. But here we are met with a difficulty that if the psychic is absent, viewing the distant scene, how can he also be present in the room, animating his own body and speaking through it as he undoubtedly does in many cases? Most psychics, when they begin their development, see shapes and figures more frequently than they experience any other phenomena. They wonder why this should be. Why should nearly all of us see? Now and then, it is true, we come across one who hears more easily than sees, but he is the exception, not the rule. Why and how we see in clairvoyance. The explanation of this fact is probably the following. We use our eyes more than we do any other one of our senses. We feel that our active consciousness is more connected with sight than with anything else. The sight centers in the brain are more used than any of the others, and this fact is proved by dreams, in which we see figures but very seldom hear spoken words. Again, our memory consists mostly of visual symbols. If we think of a person, we call up his image before us, this being a memory image. Now, as these parts of the mind and brain are so active, it is only an extension of this faculty of inducing memory images which enables us to see objects and figures in clairvoyance. We only have to force this faculty of the mind a little more than usual to carry it beyond the limitations of physical sense. Whereas with the other senses, much less used, we have to do a great deal more of this cultivating or forcing process in order to develop the corresponding spiritual organs. Clairvoyance and similar faculties depend in many cases upon the partial liberation or freeing of the spirit from the body, and the stimulation of the corresponding psychic sense organs into a higher degree of activity, and so permitting their use. The following are a few exercises which will be found helpful in developing this faculty of clairvoyance according to our methods of development. Developing exercises. 1. Seat yourself in a comfortable chair in a semi-darkened room. Mentally construct, i.e. imagine, before you a tube, open at both ends. One end of this tube fits over your eyes, and the other end extends indefinitely outward into space. Imagine that this tube is hollow and that you can see through it perfectly. Turn this tube in the direction of the house of a friend of yours. Mentally go into a room and see if you can discover in it anyone present, and if so, who he is and what he looks like. Note what you see carefully. You will be able to verify the next day how far your vision is correct. 2. Construct the tube as before. At the other end of this tube, which you should imagine about 100 yards long, you must endeavor to see clairvoyantly the face of a friend. Try to distinguish the features of this face, making them clearer and clearer. When you have done this, gradually pull it toward you by an effort of will, until it is only about 2 or 3 feet distant. It should then be perfectly clear and every feature distinguishable. When you have succeeded in visualizing this face so clearly that you see it as distinctly as you would if that individual stood before you in life, your progress as a clairvoyant will have made great advances, and you may then begin experiments in influencing this person at a distance, while seeing his face before you as explained. Will that he should do a certain thing, to think of you at a certain time, or see your face float before him as he is busy with his daily occupations. If you practice this persistently, you will ultimately achieve success, being able to influence persons without doubt. Polarization and how to use it. This ability to influence a distant person or object by means of your will, when directed toward him, has been termed a polarization, because you polarize a path or channel through the astral atmosphere toward the desired point, and this channel facilitates psychic communication in both directions. A great deal depends, during these experiments, upon your ability to hold the object clearly in your mind's eye, and to concentrate upon it. If you do not do this, your efforts will be lost, since you will find there are a great many astral currents, playing to and fro, which tend to disintegrate your own currents set up by you, and unless these are strong, you will not succeed in overcoming the astral cross-currents. In conducting these experiments, you must be sure, especially at first, always to keep your consciousness centered in your own body, and not to let it go outward into space along with your thought. Your will alone must travel outward. You must keep your consciousness within your own physical body. If you do not do this, you will be apt to get into trouble. Your starting point, your focal center, as it is called, must always be maintained. In developing clairvoyance, you should remember that faith and belief tend to open up your latent powers and faculties, while disbelief has the contrary effect of closing them and shutting off all further development. This is true in all lines of psychic unfoldment. Clairvoyance is a faculty possessed by the whole human race in varying degrees, and there are indications that with each generation its power is becoming greater and greater, so that the time will doubtless come when everyone will see clairvoyantly, just as we now see with our ordinary eyes. In fact, the possession of strong intuition and sentiments, sensing the feelings and emotions of others, etc., are but undeveloped clairvoyant flashes, giving you an insight into the mind of the person with whom you are conversing. Factors in the development of clairvoyance. Concentration is an important factor in the cultivation of clairvoyance. You must train your mind so that you can think of a particular object for several minutes without relaxing or allowing any other thought to enter your consciousness. You must practice gazing at an object until you can do this for 2 or 3 minutes without moving your eyes and without fatigue. You should cultivate deep breathing exercises and, during inspiration, think that you are drawing on the vital energy of the universe, while with each breath you exhale, you are throwing off any adverse influences which may have come to you. Visualizing is an important factor in developing clairvoyance. You should get into the habit of calling up before your mind a face you have seen or a scene you have witnessed that day, trying to remember every detail and making it clearer and clearer until you have every detail clear in your mind's eye. You should then endeavor to project it outward into space, as though you were seeing these pictures outside your head as real entities, and not merely as memory pictures. Crystal gazing, etc., will greatly help in this. How to distinguish true from false. One question which always presents itself to the mind of the student is this: how can I distinguish the true from the false, real clairvoyant visions from memory pictures and hallucinations? It is extremely difficult to do this, particularly for the beginner, and this ability to distinguish comes only with prolonged practice and experience. A lady of my acquaintance has all her life been enabled to distinguish between phantasmal figures of the living and those of the dead. That is, she could tell by looking at the figure whether it represented a living or a dead person. Again, she was always able to tell whether this was a genuine or helpful intelligence, or whether it was an evil or lying one. This ability to distinguish cannot be gained in a day. It must come by practice, and the beginnings of genuine clairvoyance can only be ascertained by experiment and by following up on the visions and figures which appear to one, and see whether they lead to anything definite in the way of progress and enlightenment or not. As to the various symbols and colors which appear to the clairvoyant, these should be interpreted according to the rules laid down in chapters 11 and 12, devoted to these subjects. Clairvoyance and dreams will be discussed in the next chapter. A few words in conclusion as to the theory of clairvoyance. It will be remembered that I enumerated before, pages 117 to 124, the various theories which have been advanced to explain clairvoyance, the astral sense theory, the direct vision theory, etc. Our own view of the matter is that all of the explanations previously proposed are in a sense true. That is, they are all true in particular cases, but that none of them explains all types of clairvoyance. The spirit influence theory is true in some instances. The direct clairvoyance theory is true in others, and the astral sense theory is the correct one in still others, etc. The mystery solved. As to the difficulty which is presented by the fact that a clairvoyant can animate and speak through his own body while he is psychically active elsewhere, this is explained by assuming that only a portion of his total psychic self remains behind, and that the more active spirit part performs the journey or excursion, this part being connected to the physical body by means of a cord or connection which unites it to the latter. This connection is sometimes called the silver thread, and is the channel of communication between the spirit and its body, while the former has gone on its excursion. If this thread were to snap or become broken, death would take place, since the spirit would be unable to return and reanimate the body. Such accidents are extremely rare, but they have been recorded from time to time in the past. In clairvoyance, the connection remains, of course, intact, and communication back and forth between the body and the absent psychic self takes place along this cord or thread. In still other types of clairvoyance, on the other hand, no actual excursion or leaving the body takes place. The active consciousness remains in the body, animating it, while the clairvoyant vision takes place through the psychic telescope or tube before mentioned. In such cases, there is no difficulty in accounting for all we see, but this is not such an advanced type of clairvoyance as the former, in which the psychic self leaves the body and goes on trips and excursions of its own. End of Chapter 14. Recording by Jeannie Hall, Eldersburg, Maryland.